So hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 of Getting Started with Modular. My series of just sharing ideas, thoughts from people that are either fully into modular and have tried to build a wall out of it, or someone new and maybe interesting for synths or desktop things, or a great musician or another YouTuber. Want to share ideas and thoughts and tips on getting started with modular. So without further ado, we have Mr. BoBeats. How are you, Bo?
Hello. It's all good. It's all good. Thank you for having me on. It's sort of a role reversal for me since I've been interviewing people all autumn. But
Yeah,
it feels good. It feels good to be on the other end of things.
yeah. So I imagine most people are going to know who you are. If not, links will be in the description for both. But
Yeah.
just
I'm not sure if it's if it's only the good, it's only a good thing. I think some people will know me for some cheesy videos, and some people will know me for some good videos.
so what I was just going to say, just briefly before we start, who are you and what would you say you do? But let's start with the cheesy ones. What cheesy?
Yeah. I think I accidentally popularized the talking videos in the synth community. So sorry, didn't mean to do that. Suddenly everybody's doing it. But no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, cheesy videos. I think I'm one of my cheesier videos is I did like a Volca kick rant. I don't know, and it's still getting tons of views, and I don't know. But
I like the when that came out, all the memes for like Volca cowbell.
yeah,
The
yeah,
fact
that
that to
was
make
funny.
a drum kit, you would have to have 8 single Volcas.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good content around that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I know. I've done a couple of those videos, just kind of poking fun at stuff. But I guess um, I guess I'm most known for my circuit videos, Novision Circuit. I do a lot of I did a lot of tutorials and stuff on that early on. Gained a bit of a following from there, and I moved on doing a lot of general music production tips and tricks videos, and of course the Electron videos. Like I wouldn't say like I'm the biggest Electron tutorial guy. There are others that do a lot better stuff, but I dig their products, and they're a big like centerpiece of the big centerpieces in my DAWless setup that I use a lot.
Mm.
So it's sort of, I guess that's what I'm known for. And for more psychology oriented videos, kind of hobby psychology or oriented videos, about like creativity and about being productive and stuff like that. I've done a few.
Yeah, well, I really like that personal aspect to your channel, and I'm hoping conversation flows like we've both known each other a long time, because
Yeah.
in a very brief, well, always, I hope all streams are like that, but within a very brief period of time, maybe around Christmas, we started talking to each other.
Yeah.
So we don't know each other that well or for that long, but you very quickly become someone that's very easy to talk to. The channel and all your content, I think, is very easy and personable and open as well, which is always a nice feeling. The first time we did speak to set this chat up and kind of do a test run, it kind of felt like a friend had come round.
Yeah.
As that sounds, and that's all. It's great, and that's the real thing I love about this kind of synth community and the YouTube community. I love all that, and kind of thanks.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I did a video recently on that topic. I don't know if you saw it, like why I love hardware synths, and like a big point I had was that I so much enjoyed the sort of community aspect around hardware equipment
Mm,
that I don't think we're seeing on the software side. On the software side, it's even more entrenched. I think it's like the Cubase people and the Ableton people, and I mean, since it's so fun because people come together from different age groups, different musical backgrounds. Also, I think it's amazing. I have viewers that I know are excellent, like do funk music, rock music, indie stuff, and not everybody's doing the electronic stuff, and I enjoy that a lot. seeing that and be able to talk to people from different genres.
Yeah, it's very open. So what? I mean, this is going to be about getting started with
Yeah,
Modular.
sure.
We should say we're both watching the live chat. If you've questions, we might type a reply back. We'll possibly pull the feed in on screen, answer some questions in the chat as well. So fire away with questions. We are watching the live stream if you're watching this live. But what's your kind of entry into Modular? If I pull up your YouTube channel, people will see that you've just put up a video on why am I going to Eurorack. I won't play the video on screen, but and what gear am I starting out with? So you right at the start of this journey of going modular from desktop units and a DAW setup. What kind of led to modular, if you like? Is there a single kind of catalyst to why you've moved this way?
Yeah, I guess it started when I kind of started I started getting into stuff with let's see here, with the Mother 32, or sorry, not the Mother 32 even, the Sub 37 was sort of the first thing I used where I started to think more about patching different stuff together. I don't, it's, you know, it's not an open architecture in any way, you know, you can't really patch stuff. Just the way I started to think about synths changed a lot when I got the Sub 37. Because prior to that, I was more a preset guy. I've dabbled a bit with synthesis on the circuit and stuff, but yeah. And then from the Sub 37, I moved on to the Mother 32, I think. And you know, when I first got it, I didn't know anything. I didn't have a clue what CV was and all that good stuff. So I just started experimenting with it, and I found that it was a lot more intuitive and a lot more fun than I had imagined. So I guess like the Mother 32 was definitely a big influence.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point to make a distinction as to what was the point you started thinking more in depth about synthesis, because that's kind of not necessarily linked to modular. For me, it was Massive by Native Instruments.
Oh yeah, sure.
And the way that the only thing I did really do was route the two effects at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of repitching, and I don't know if it's a frequency shifter or a sample and hold, or I haven't used it for a long time. And it was just, does that come pre or post filter? And it was the first point I used to think, do I want to distort before the filter and then filter more harmonics, or do I want to filter it and then kind of warm it up afterwards? And that's, you know, it's not modular software. It's very limited in its kind of repatching options.
Yeah, sure.
And I think I patch Massive and other bits of software better having used this stuff and now going both ways.
Yeah, for me, and we talked a bit about this prior to the show. For me, I used presets for like the longest period of time. I used a ton of presets. I was like making almost all of my music based on presets that I tweaked a bit. I for like the first 10 years, I didn't really make any sounds of my own, except I guess for when I used hardware synths, the synths I had, because for some reason it just makes sense to me. I guess also getting into music when the sort of VST revolution was sort of happening, there were so many great presets. There was never any shortages of sounds, and I don't know why, but I never really enjoyed patching stuff on a computer. I just didn't like it. I didn't enjoy creating sounds. I'm not sure why. So what I realized when I started with the Mother 32 was that was actually, I think, the first time like I thoroughly enjoyed creating a sound. And I think also what ties into it is that it has this there's a limit. There's it's kind of here and now in a sense. It's very physical, just like with any synth, but it's also very here and now, because once you plug pull the cables, there's no save, there's no memory. There was something with that kind of, got me going, got me excited.
Yeah, me too, definitely for that. And I love that. I've seen a lot of people commenting recently actually about the Neutron.
Yeah.
Obviously lots of talk about that anyway, but saying, come on guys, it's 2018, why doesn't this thing have patch memory? Why can't I save preset? To me, that's not the beauty of it at all. And the approach to that is, and I don't mean this in any kind of condescending way or to say that I know what I'm doing and you don't or any of that, but if you learn the building blocks enough, really truly learn the synthesis and spend some time with it, like any instrument, you can't pick up a guitar and just go do a gig. Even a free chord punk gig, you need to have played it a little bit. So, you can get close, you can pull back a similar experience and vibe, but the fact that it will never be exactly the same. You may have a recording of it and be the greatest sound designer ever, and you're tweaking and trying to pull back the exact same sound, and it's kind of like the magic's gone and you either captured it or you didn't. And I think that's a really cool thing generally with semi-modular or hardware modular. And it's really, I almost find kind of unpatching really cleansing, especially on this larger system, to just finish what I'm doing. I usually put some music on, or even I listen to a lot of talk shows instead of actual music a lot of the time. Put something on when I finish the session and just pull all the cables, and it's such a clear, refreshing palette.
Yeah, sure.
There's none of that. I'm sure we've all got DAW projects that we've never finished. The folder of 8-bar loops, and there's 500 8-bar loops.
Yeah, I sort of feel like with hardware synths in general, but even more so with the modular, if it doesn't tie me down, it doesn't bring me down, it doesn't become a burden in a sense. Sometimes I feel like, the like at the 100th demo project in Machina, it becomes sort of a mental burden to know that that's there. And I thoroughly enjoy the whole process of, like you say, you patch something up and that's that. And if you record it, you'll probably never get the exact same result again. If you go back and try and redo it. And I just, I've just started out, but I'm already noticing this since I record a lot of stuff for my YouTube channel. I've noticed that that it's just very exciting. I tried to recreate one thing I did, and I just couldn't really do it. I didn't really have the clear memory of it, and it's sometimes the vibe just isn't there. And it sounds slightly different. So,
yeah, I mean, my last lot of, I know some of my audience, your audience potentially don't know, but my day job is teaching music, either as a lecturer of music in a college or a drum teacher. A little bit of guitar teaching, but mainly drum kit and percussion tuition. And the last band I was in was a jazz band with a couple of rappers, kind of rap, jazz, crossover stuff. And we would just hit record from the minute we go in the room, and maybe it was the rapper sat behind my drum kit while I put the kettle on. Everything was recorded, and it was that thing of, we come back next week, the rappers would basically take what we'd done as kind of sample fodder. They'd either work with it or they wouldn't. Fairly ruthless, you'd have 3 hours of material and they go, nah, wasn't feeling anything from that session. It was great fun, so it didn't matter. But sometimes you'd go back and it would be, oh, do you remember that thing you guys were doing about an hour into practice? And it's like, no, we were just jamming. Someone shouted out a key and we were just playing. And he goes, right, I've recorded it. Do this. And you can never quite get the vibe back. And for those two rappers who are great musicians themselves and great rappers, they can hear this, and you can hear it in your own recordings, even if you try and repatch from detailed notes. It's just not quite there for some reason. So these live recordings of the band were kind of there just to write to, just, let's take that loop. They would chop it up in a very familiar hip hop style, put a different beat to it maybe, and that would be then something we'd relearn and play live. But those recordings just ended up being the final product. They were multi-track to a certain extent. It wasn't just there's one microphone in the room, go kind of thing. And it's so kind of vibe driven, and I don't know if everyone else can hear it in the end product, but certainly the composers, musicians, producers themselves, I think, can hear it.
Yeah, I think at least, and even if you can't hear it per se, I think you couldn't, like you're saying, you couldn't really arrive at that point. You couldn't arrive at that musical point if you didn't have that certain vibe, certain feel, and I guess that's something I'm striving for in general with the way I've sort of set my studio up, and the way I want to continue exploring making music with various synths, is that I want to make a setup, or continue making a setup that can just capture something in the moment. That's something that I really strive for, which is not really easy for me, because and I've talked about this in other videos, I'm more of I tend to be a little bit controlling when it comes to my music. Like letting go and just going with the flow can sometimes be hard for me. It's I don't know. I can quickly become quite self-aware of what I'm doing and kind of lose that in the moment feel. So a lot of the stuff I'm picking up, a lot of the gear I'm picking up is it's stuff that I think helps me a little bit with getting more into that creative zone and just going with it. So modular for me was partly, this was a big reason to try out modular and see if it could give me even more of that, in the present creative energy.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Yeah. I will just mention the live chat again.
Yeah, sure.
Here it is. We are watching it. We've got Noir at Blank V, Symphonatomy, loads
What's up, Noir?
Yeah, as in there. He's a very popular guy. As soon as he popped in, he's got lots of little hello messages.
Yeah.
But if you are in the live chat,
he's another good-looking dude.
The good-looking guys of Sims. I did, and I won't cut off what we're doing and spend too long finding this. I did put one of the synth manufacturers on a fireman's calendar. Around a little joke from Superbooth. I told him in the interview
awesome.
at Superbooth. I can't remember what it was. I said something like, "You're the Mr. Motivator," who was a kind of bad TV gym instructor over here in the UK. You're the Mr. Motivator of Sims. And he kind of laughed in the video, and I thought, I'm going to troll you in this video. I'll find the picture later. But yeah, if you're in the live chat, fire away with questions or chat.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, if there's any questions, of course, Ben here, seasoned Eurorack user, or if there's something that you think a noob like myself can help you with, just drop a comment. But yeah. So I told you earlier that I'm definitely trying to keep the gear acquisition in check here, because I'm looking at your wall and it's looking tempting.
Yeah, it's I think we've said this off camera before, that if you don't have a kind of little pool of money to play with, can be incredibly frustrating. And I think that's a really important point before we delve further into your semi-modular experience, my modular experience, is that modular isn't necessarily for everyone. And if you've just spent £200-300 plus on a case that's got 2 modules in and it isn't doing what you want, and maybe they were modules that everybody said you had to have, but they're incredibly complicated without other tools to make use of them, there's potential you're going to sell it all. And that, I kind of don't have any advice against that. I kind of, if that's the case, do this. I think be aware that, there is an investment up front.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think and I told you this earlier as well, but I have this idea here, which is very simple. If you don't have money, don't go for hardware in general. Get a computer, get a sound card, and use software, because it's much more cost effective, and it will give you the same sort of results in the end if you're creative with it. And modular for me is definitely something of a luxury thing. It's not something that you should go into unless you're willing to spend money.
Mm.
So when I started out with my ideas for a Eurack series, because if somebody doesn't know, basically my primary interest when it comes to synths at the moment and music at the moment is not making music for myself. That's like, I say it's like 30% of what I do. The rest is just teaching and sharing stuff with my audience, sharing my perspectives on stuff. That's what I want to be doing. So when people throw the meme, make music, don't get more gear at me, it's sort of strange because it's what I do. And I saw a good question in the chat as well. Somebody asked like, what's my day job? And I don't make much money from my day job. I work about 50% at a university, so it's not that super well paying where I live. But and for the rest of the time I do YouTube. So basically getting a chance to try out modules, try out different types of gear and reviewing it and talking about it. That's my part-time job. So yeah, so for me personally, if I didn't have the channel, I would probably never have gone into modular because I don't think it would have made any like financial or practical sense. But since I have the channel and since I really enjoy the idea of modular, I felt like this is a good opportunity for me to explore something that I'm super interested about and share it with my audience. But if I didn't have that, I would probably have thought, okay, is this really an investment that I'm ready to make? Like, do I have the pool of money that I want to put into this? And I don't think I would have, actually.
Yeah. I think where you're at and how you're sharing it, and I'd like to shout out Molten Music or Molten Modular, that's Robin Vincent, in a very similar position and sharing his experiences in a very similar way, where he's just saying, look, I'm new to this. I've got this new oscillator. Let's plug it in and see what happens. And I really enjoy that. And I remember someone saying, after I'd commented on one of Robin's videos, that I enjoyed this long form exploration of a fairly basic oscillator, and one that I've got, and I think I'd even done a video on anyway. So I wasn't in there to learn about the oscillator, but I really like that sharing the journey aspect. And I just love that kind of open hands of let's explore this together. I think there's a lot to be gained. And I think there's a lot of people currently, I said the word term modular curious earlier.
Yeah.
Which kind of sparked this whole weird.
Yeah.
Is that like being bi-curious? We're not sure what's
Modular curious. Yeah, sure.
Modular curious. There's a lot of people,
exactly.
they want to dip their toes in the water, but they're not sure. And I hope it isn't, but I'm sure that people seeing me with this maybe thinks, well, Ben's not the guy to speak to. He's too far into this. He's just going to say, yeah, modular's great, or maybe he doesn't want to talk to me. I get a lot of people saying, oh, sorry to ask a really newbie basic question. And it's like, well, I was there. We were all there. I had no clue about any of this.
Yeah, you're super generous with. I mean, I've troubled you with a ton of like basic, like what's a U, what's HP, measurement stuff. Like I'm totally confused about those sort of things. But yeah, you've been super generous with that. But I do get what you're saying, and I think that's very true. That hardware synths, like it has a like a, how do you say it in English? Well, there's like a bar, I guess, there's sort of a knowledge bar or bar for entry.
Yeah, like a barrier for entry kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think modular is like even worse in one sense. So one thing I'm really excited to do is hopefully show. I think not in the next, like maybe in the third episode in my series, to show a kind of a really like practical use case for modular, which doesn't really have anything to do with creating sounds on the modular, but rather using the modular as an FX rack. And when we start looking at the money that you have to put into it, it's not that bad, really. It's not that bad. If you don't need an output module, if you don't need if you can just work around certain things and just focus on a couple of effects modules, the cost of the rack and the effects modules it's basically the rack cost that will be more than buying like a pedal.
Yeah, or 19-inch rack gear, or I'd agree with that. I don't know if I do this. The tower never ends. The top, not the Mr. Wazo vinyl, the case next to it is pretty much all effects. And I run it as a stereo send off of my console, which is also my interface. And pricing it up compared to running a 19-inch rack of effects of that quality with that much control. Well, there isn't that much control on pedals or rack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's
very comparable. I think it's the synth side and drum machine. If you were to go buy 8 drum voices and a powerful sequencer, you're up to buying a vintage original 808 in price. So I think that side is potentially more of a money pit. The effects side, there's a lot of very creative people making interesting, weird, strange, unusual, quirky devices, all ranging qualities. There's some very cheap things that sound great for being cheap, like just a really dirty fuzz and a digital bit crush, mangling stuff kind of modules, right up to 96K 32-bit float processing digital stuff. With a ton of control that we don't often see on those devices. So it's a very interesting point. There's a couple of bits in the chat I just wanted to pull up. Someone mentioned the program Reason. I used Reason and teach on Reason for part of my job, and they're saying how they like that hardware environment and that helped them in terms of learning things. It's when you hit tab on the keyboard on Reason, it flips around.
Yeah, I remember.
All, the Maelstrom, and I forget the name of the subtractive stim in there, but they've got a CV and a gate input. And I remember seeing those when I was younger thinking, what the hell is CV? And I never used it, but going back to it, or if there was all this kind of content around modular now, I think that would have been great.
Yeah.
The other thing, just to pull up from the chat, someone says the only thing they want to save in a modular, going back to us talking about enjoying pulling it down and being in the moment, are their sequences. A lot of, at least the digital sequences that will do quantized pitches and longer step lengths and things, they will all save. Or 90% off will all save your sequence.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. And for example, for me, I'm personally focusing more on having like the sequencer outside of the rack. Actually, I have the BeatStep Pro, I have the circuits, I have the Digitact, the Octatrack. So I'm actually going to focus a lot on having that separate. Well, I guess that's also like the approach that I will have to it, is that I think, just like you're saying, like when you start to look at multiple voices and sequencers, of course things will get expensive pretty quickly. So as a beginner, I'm more thinking that I want to incorporate the stuff I already got outside of the Eurorack and use as much as possible from the outside and to control it. Got the Touche controller as well. I'm gonna hook it up with CV, use that as well. So I think that will be a lot of fun. I saw an interesting question as well, or a statement like David says here, that the cases and power is expensive, and I would agree. Like, that's, for me, getting into it, that was the first thing I started to research. Of course, that makes sense. I guess it's kind of similar to most people. But I also realized that if you just look for used stuff and if you don't go too big, the case doesn't necessarily have to be that expensive. Like the Dopfer stuff is pretty inexpensive, and even here in Sweden, kind of a small country, there's a big used market. So like the Dopfer LC6 or something, or whatever they are called, and I can't remember exactly the prices, but they were quite affordable. So when I So when I started to think about like a Eurorack effects rig, because that was my starting point, I looked at like spending maybe like 150 euros or maybe up to 200 euros on a case, and then add a couple of modules and go from there. And when I so So you said also that the big thing that's a difference between your rack and the other hardware gear, the outboard gear, like the effects units and stuff. Like one big thing is all the modulation options. And the first module I picked up was Clouds, and the amount of stuff you can do with it as an effects unit is pretty crazy. And I bought it used, and it cost around the same as my TC Hall of Fame Reverb, I think. And it's not even close. I mean, the TC Hall of Fame sounds good, but if I would factor in like the cost of a case and power with a used Clouds, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's still it's a super powerful thing, really, when I start to compare it.
Yeah, definitely. A couple of points there. You mentioning modular and modulation. I'm just going to pull up a YouTube search so you can see the thumbnail. If I start the video, people won't see it. But Rob Hordijk, who designs his own 5U system. U is a measurement of height. We get 19-inch rack gear that is either 1U high or 2 or 3. Your rack is 3U tall, the modules. 5U is the bigger Moog format. There's synthesizers.com, there's MOTM, there's lots of different kind of sub-formats of this. The Hordijk format is slightly bigger. But that top video there, Rob Hordijk's presentation and synth tutorial from Modular Meets Leeds, he says, modular is about modulation, and he takes a Korg SQ1, relatively inexpensive device, and the whole talk, it's just short of an hour, is how can I take a 3-note sequence, make something way more interesting without ever going back and touching the SQ.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's super. That's what makes it so cool. Like that's a real big appeal for me. Just the way you can, especially for me as a beginner, because I'm not afraid. I'm a beginner, but I'm not afraid to like hook shit up, as long as I am plugging the output to the inputs and not messing that up. I'm not afraid to patch stuff and really try and try different things. And just so for example, I think I paid like 180 euros for the Clouds, and it's a reverb. It's like a, how do you say, like a grain sampler, I suppose.
Basic looper texture.
And you can even do like a I'm not sure if you would say it's like a oscillator, but you can.
Yeah.
You can. I used the keyboard output from the Mini Brute 2 and controlled the pitch, and it worked pretty stably. I don't know, I didn't try it over many octaves, but I could get it to work, like with adding like almost like a fifth to the notes I was playing, and I mean for the money, I think it's crazy versatile. Now if I don't know, I guess most people might not need it, but I mean, at least when people say that it's very expensive with modular, I guess like if it's like when people say that Electron gear is expensive. When you factor in the stuff you can do with it, the amount of functionality that's there, I'm not really so sure that it's really that expensive. I mean, there's just so much in the Electron gear, for example, so much possibility, and there's so many functions and reverbs and effects units, etc. And I feel that some modules, at least, maybe not all of them, are like that. Very, very deep in a sense. And I also, a friend of mine, Mark, I gotta give him a shout out. He's another guy I've been sort of harassing with all the beginner questions. Like, okay, what's this? How does this work? Well, he told me like to get the Parasite's firmware for the Clouds, and it looks insane.
Yeah, I haven't delved far into alternative firmwares that much, but yeah, the one for Clouds turns it into a fully fledged reverb. So rather than that just being an additional kind of splash of ambience, every knob is a reverb setting, pre-delay, reflections, decay,
Yeah.
and other things as well.
Yeah.
Another couple of points. DB Powlan in the chat said modules you can't or won't do without. I presume that's a question for me, potentially, or both of us. I'll just fire a question back. The reason for pulling that up and not just replying in the live chat. In what situation? I think that's too hard of a question for me to answer as just a blanket statement. If that's building a drum machine, then I can talk about a couple of the kind of drum voices I'd really like. If that's the effects module or the mixer or the filter for certain things or bass, synth, that's much easier. If you can just add another kind of specific thing to that or a couple of specific things, that'll be easier.
For me, it's very easy. I have one module. Wait, where is it there? One module in the rack. And it's the clouds, and it's amazing. But I actually have, your audience is more hardcore, of course, than mine when it comes to your rack. But I have a box here with cool stuff that I'm going to test out. The little Befaco crush delay. I'm super excited. I think it'll be the next module that I'll insert and try out. The crush delay. And seems awesome. And the even VCO and the spring reverb, which was super exciting to see a real spring on a reverb. Like, that's amazing.
DB also mentioned most underrated modules. Again, I'm going to have a series of videos on underrated modules actually as soon as I can get around to it. I'm too busy to kind of insert a new series into my schedule, but I've got that planned out with quite detailed notes. But again, in kind of what situation, if you want me to go most underrated filter, most underrated little mixer, utility, fire back.
That's awesome. That's a great idea for making a video, making videos on. And that's also really nice, Ben, because that will tie into sort of a more also both the beginner and the experienced audience, I think.
I'm hoping so.
Yeah, definitely. I got a Raffles Prugger says, "Wait, Bo, aren't you exercising restraint in your rack?" Well, yes, I am, but the way I exercise restraint is that I basically won't buy modules. So I'm basically basically I'm reaching out to companies to sponsor videos with modules. That's the way I'm really trying. That's the way for me to really exercise restraint, because it's otherwise, I've already looked at like 20 modules used, like, oh, this is only $50, this is awesome. But I told myself and my missus that if I'm going to do this series, going to explore this type of synthesis, I will definitely talk to companies. So Befaco sent me those modules. Super gracious of them to do that, even though I'm a beginner into this. But I guess they wanted to see like what I could do with them. So that'll be super fun.
The biggest restraint surely is that you've got modules there in a box and you aren't putting them in the rack right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I told you earlier, like you asked me like, Bo, have you inserted anymore? So I have the Mother 32 I need to rack mount, but I'm really, guys, I'm truly self-aware that, I could get carried away here. So I definitely need to put up some kind of boundary for myself not to get swept away, because I feel like the rabbit hole is deep here.
Yeah, another couple of points. I'll pull the chat in for these. Binary Bad has asked if the Neutron from Behringer is Euro Rackable. Yes, it is. I intend to do that for some videos I've got coming soon. I've got 7 videos that I filmed months ago testing the Neutron. And I thought, I'd not kind of discussed it with Behringer, so I don't know why, but I kind of thought, if these are quite blurry and off angle and they don't show all the features, maybe they'll use them as part of the kind of promo teaser campaign. And I sent them over to them. It's very quick and easy for me to record. They ended up not using them in that sense, but listening to the patches and that audio from those was part of my kind of feedback, prototyping that with them. But I will do some more kind of fulsome content. But it is You're a Rackable. And then just under that, I'm sorry because I'm really going to butcher your name, Floosborough, the top one there on the chat, has said to start small and have a plan. I definitely agree with starting small. I did, believe it or not, from the system behind me. But in terms of having a plan, now that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we talked about this.
Yeah. I don't think you want a set in stone plan. It's really tempting to go on modulargrid.net, a fantastic website. It's like playing Tetris. You set up a case of a certain size and you're trying to fit all the modules in, and these oscillators must be really cool with this filter, and having this wave folder and this low pass gate must work really well. And it's great fun and dreaming up rigs on there, but I think if you plan a whole case, or even just plan a whole row, maybe you'd buy the row at once, 1 or 2 rows, is not the best way to do it at all. I would buy, maybe 3 at once. Make sure those 3 can do something on their own. Don't just buy 3 utilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't just buy 3 utilities that can't offer any utility for anything else. But, an oscillator, a filter, and an LFO, or a little voice module and a mixer and an effect. Or just start small and let that experience guide what comes.
I think that's very brilliant. I think that's a great advice, and I think it's something that I kind of, because I asked for a lot of advice on different forums, etc., before starting out this journey, and I did get the advice from a lot of people, like plan out your build, plan what you want to do, etc., etc. And I even have it in my first video in the URAC with Bo first episode. My man Scott, a patron of mine, he says that you should have an idea of what you want to achieve, and I think that for some people that might work, but for somebody like me who's more into that, like being intuitive, the novel experience, that sort of stuff. I don't really like to build Lego from blueprints. I like to just pour out a whole bunch of Legos and just go where it takes me, like where the pieces take me. It wasn't for me. And I saw Noir at Blank V had a great question, like what was my idea of going into Eurorack, like what my plans. So first, I of course, after like looking at the initial feedback I got from people, was to kind of, okay, I'm going to make a voice. In order to make a voice, I need this and this and this. And then I realized, like, wait, I already have like 20 synth voices here or more in the studio, so I'm not sure that's exciting. So my second plan was to make an FX rack, and that's sort of still the plan that I think, like, like building on 1 or 2 voices with my semi-modulars, adding effects unit. Now I got the Befako stuff. I got a Maleko dual Borg coming as well, the filter, and just trying to build on those voices, adding effects, because I feel like I can definitely try and make more modular music with the voices, and like use maybe my BeatStep Pro to sequence it. But mainly I want to just have it like a side piece and integrate it with my bigger setup, and just maybe have a voice or 2 that I can control via the Digitact, and add effects to it and tweak away and just create some really strange sounds that way, I think.
Yeah. In the live chat, DB Powland come back and said his original question about, most under what could I not do without or not live without, was in the last kind of interview, the rig rundown video I did with R. Benny. He said that clouds was his go-to module. It's tough if that's without, saying a more specific subset of modules. I mean, for drums, I really love the Variegate 8 Plus. The DLD from 4MS, the dual looping delay, I've said several times, is hands down one of the best. And it's subjective. This isn't the best. This is, for me, one of my best and most interesting and most fun and most fruitful musically as well experiences in modular. I absolutely love the DLD. Now, it's got its flaws, don't get me wrong, and I spoke to friends that have had them and sold them and kind of said, are you crazy? Why would you get rid of this thing? And I get where they're coming from. It's not maybe for everyone, but the DLD really stands out. any of the AGH synth stuff is really stunning. That mini mod voice, I think, is the best sounding synth voice I've heard in any format anywhere. Everything Alan touches is kind of gold. But there's lots of little nuggets like that for me, that in any given situation, there would be several things that I'd really want for where I'm at musically at the minute, which is this kind of 4-voice, 5-voice polyphonic ambient modular thing that's part performance, part generative. The Harmonig from Instruo, which takes a single voltage in, it's a quantizer, will quantize your notes to a scale, but then give you a root, third, fifth, and seventh set of intervals output to create 4-voice chords. You then obviously need all the back end to create 4 voices, which I'm fortunate enough to have. But for that application, that really is the key to what I'm doing. So I guess I still can't. I'm avoiding the question of just saying this is my favorite module. But it's kind of
yeah. I feel like after a year or so, or half a year with Modular, I will be pumping out those videos. I'm not afraid to stick my neck out. I think this is actually like the prime. I realized this today, seeing some of the comments on my beginner video. Like, if I want to create some controversy, it feels like the URAC crowd. I could get people kind of triggered. It could probably. I already see somebody here in the chat said don't write down URAC sequencers. They are nothing like the BeatStep or Electron stuff where you construct whole songs. They're more like songwriting tools. Yeah, definitely. Like sequencers, I'm super excited about sequencers in the URAC system. Basically, what I'm most excited about with URAC sequencers is using them as modulation sources.
Yes, I was just going to say I thought it was to hand just to grab, but it isn't. Something like the RYO VC sequencer.
Yeah, I think
just analog 8 steps that just move around. Something like that.
I think it's brilliant.
Or the crush delay, so that every 6th or 7th step is a longer delay time, then it pulls back, and all
exactly.
the utility sequences will be amazing for a kind of synth expansion effects.
Yeah, right. I think toying around a lot with the VCV rack, the software URAC system, I really got excited by just using like a 8-step sequencer, sending different voltages on different steps and just modulating something, and that was something that I hadn't thought of before, using a sequencer as a modulation source, and that's another cool thing. But I guess like what my first aim is not, at least where I'm at now, is not to use like the modular on its own to create music. I guess that's not the first aim, but I might totally change my mind in a couple of weeks. Suddenly something just appears and I realize that okay, I don't need to hook this up or something.
I don't think at this point, with your Electron gear and other gear, it's a smart move to get the initial things being the building blocks of its own system. I think you've got all the control with the Electron units and the Mini Brute 2. You can control, you can add interesting little sound generators and processors, and I think being a whole new kind of sonic playground, if you like, much quicker than trying to flesh out half of the system with utilities that you've already got.
Exactly.
I'm not comfortable with. I'm not particularly well versed on Electron gear. I'm sure you are. So you'll be able to get ideas out and sequences quickly. You don't need to be frustrated by a new sequencer and a new sound device. You want to explore the sound device, I think, from a familiar path. I think it's more fruitful and enjoyable.
Yeah, and somebody said in the chat here, M. Campbell said that the BeatStep Pro is so cheap, any newcomer should have one. And I really dig the BeatStep Pro, and I think one thing I want to do is I want to try and use the BeatStep Pro. I think this should be doable, Ben, using the BeatStep Pro with the. I'm thinking about the melodic
Yeah, the two melodic sequencers.
Yeah, the two melodic sequencers. Using those to modulate stuff.
Yes.
Should be possible, right?
Yeah, so each, the BeatStep Pro, I'd agree. There's one here under the desk, but there's stuff in front. So I'm not going to yank it out. I still pick up a BeatStep Pro if I'm going out with my modular for kind of whatever. It's so handy. But yes, the two melodic sequencers have the gate, which is the notes on and off that you would use to then trigger envelopes or reset things. There's a pitch output and a velocity output. So with a BeatStep Pro, you've potentially 4 changing voltages from the 2 pitches and the 2 velocity sequences and the other 2 gates that go with those. And you've also got the 8 gates for the drums. So yeah, you could get a hell of a... You could just use the BeatStep to modulate clouds. You know, there's so many.
I think that would be cool. I'm running out of space though. I have like 10 pieces of equipment in this shelf over here. I need bigger. I need a bigger room. And unfortunately, my second child is coming, and I think my wife has her eyes set on this room for child's room, so I might have to move to a smaller one. But I'm actually looking for a studio somewhere to work. Mainly for music production. I saw a funny question earlier about chairs because chairs are overlooked utility. They're not very Eurex-specific chairs, but this chair I can recommend. It's a DX Racer. It's one of the gaming chairs. People love to point that out. Like, do you have a gaming chair? Yeah. Like I was a pretty hardcore esports gamer a couple of years back.
Okay.
Did a lot of StarCraft 2 to an unhealthy degree, I suppose. But yeah, this is actually a comfy chair, and it's not really that expensive. So
yeah, people shouldn't scrimp on studio furniture.
Yeah,
and your health in a chair as well. Definitely. A couple of things in the chat again, just to pull in as we're going. Heathcliff mentioned, has anyone tried the Dreadbox modules? I haven't, but I will say that I don't think they're actively promoting them very much compared to the coverage of their other gear. It's almost like they've not made any effort to make them known or approach anyone to make a video. Or it's kind of strange. You would think a company like Dreadbox that have real big local fans of their stuff that they would have. But
yeah, exactly. Like the Dreadbox stuff is something that I'd love to try out because I never got my hands on the box synth, like the Hades or Abyss or whatever. But yeah, Dreadbox modules would be a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah. The next one to pull up, I am a bit behind in the chat, but do keep firing away. Jens Jorgensen, essential mix or mix down modules, that would be interesting. It's a tricky one. I don't think modular is the place to mix something down. I tend to take between, well, it depends on the patch, but between 8 and 10 outputs is my current setup around the rest of the floor of my studio. So I will always record a stereo mix because I want to hear what I was trying to do at the time, but I hate waking up the next day, listening to it and thinking, you know, I fudged the levels on the kick drum. It's way too low or it's way too high. So I always try and record a few extra parts so I've got something to work with. It depends on how intentional it is. Sometimes I just record in stereo. I would say that the kind of big luxury mixers like the WMD Performance Mixer, the Bafako Hex Mixer series, both great for different reasons. The Performance Mixer is smaller as a single unit and has CV over things. The Hex Mix doesn't, but the Hex Mix gives you free band EQ on all 6 channels. And EQ is something you see very little of in the format. There's lots of amazing filters that can do your low bands and high bands, high passes, but there's not much EQ. Things like Music Fin Modular's Simple EQ just gives you bass and treble and a kind of tone tilt. They're useful for just nudging things around. But yeah, I think the ability to record things separately and recording effects separately as well. Even if I'm just tracking a single part, to a project and it's all clocked over MIDI or something like the Expert Sleepers devices, I'll always try and record, say, my stereo reverb separate to the synth line if I can. It depends on what it's for, but I come from a background of producing some music for TV, media libraries, and some work with big labels like Universal. And if they come back, you know, A&R come back and say, this is great, but it's too drenched in reverb, I can't get any of it back. If I've just got that recording, I can try and remake the patch, but then I risk the chance of them saying, oh, it's lost its magic. Can you not just give me what you sent, but with less reverb? It's like, well, I can't, because that's how I recorded it. So I do try and keep effects separate. Any form of EQ would be my tip. There are a few options if you search on modulargrid.net.
As a beginner, for me, it does seem kind of, it's like when people go DAW-less without a computer, and there's just some stuff that seems expensive or very impractical to do in certain formats, like in Eurorack or in a DAW-less setup, for example. Just the amount of money you'd have to spend in a DAW-less setup to with EQs and effects, etc. Not to use a computer. I mean, I think it's, I think it'll be it'll be really expensive. Somebody pointed out also in the chat that that I can be using my Analog 4 Mark II because I have one. I could use that as well to sequence stuff on my Eurorack, and that's something I've considered for sure.
Yeah, you've got 4 voices of sequencing.
That.
Does it have all 4 as CV and gate out?
No, it's just
one CV gate track.
Yeah, it's one CV gate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little bit. It's not the deepest CV sequencer out there. I think actually the BeatStep Pro would probably be. I'm not sure. I haven't experimented, but I think the BeatStep Pro might be a little bit deeper in a sense what you could do with it. I'm not entirely sure, but it's something I'm considering for sure to have it. I'm still kind of working on the setup. I'm not exactly sure what I want to use more in the DAW setup, but it's definitely going to be like Digitac, Digitone in the front.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. An interesting point from Class Young. Yeah, I'm sorry, Class. I'm going to completely, butcher your name, so I'm not going to try. But he mentioned, what's everybody's cabling strategy? Color by length or color by type? Now, it's potentially a really anal conversation, and people think, why are they talking about color type? I know Chris Meyer, at least for his first kind of course on lynda.com for learning about modular synthesis, did color code all his cables. So if it was an audio path, it was, say, red. It wasn't, but for an example, if it was a modulation signal, it was blue. If it was a gate or a clock, it was green. And it is slightly easier to follow. I would say when you're getting started, though, that unless you really invest and buy a massive system straight away, it doesn't really matter if all the cables are black. I think you would be fine either way. I tend, at this point, to just grab whatever is to hand. Have you even thought about cabling and set money aside for cables as well? You'll be surprised when you're about to spend €100 on cables.
So we're talking colors of cables here. I sorry, which color cable sounds best, guys?
Well, no, in terms of, I guess he means for sorting and arranging.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah. That makes sense. Yes.
What have you thought about?
Yeah. I mean, I really dig. So Hosa sponsored me with a lot of cables, and I got a bunch of black ones and a bunch of pastel colored ones, and I quickly realized that the pastel colored ones are so much better in the sense that you can have sort of a color scheme for what you're doing. And even with the limited stuff that I've been using, I think it's definitely makes sense to think a little bit about it, because I can imagine with your system, it must be insanity sometimes finding, what cable goes where.
Well, it's a lot take in and remember, I think, potentially. So, although it seems like such a kind of point that doesn't need discussion, I think it is something worth bringing up. But even on a small thing, like from the Mini Brute 2 into clouds, maybe you want the audio ones to be red, but the modulation out of the Mini Brute to be blue, or it takes away that kind of engineer memory side of what you're doing. I think if you're a little bit more organized in that, you potentially kind of a bit quicker on your feet in terms of creativity. But after a while, and as experience builds, I don't think it's too important. More so when you're getting into it.
So here's a question that I don't know the answer to, and I'm really curious, Ben. So Chris Harvey says, hello, can I ask, is there any limit to stacking cables? When can you stack and when can you not?
Yeah, so let me grab, hang on. I've just thrown a load down the back of my desk. So for anyone that is totally new here and hasn't seen these are based on old what's called banana cables. They're a mini jack cable called a stackable. So this would plug into a socket, but we can then stack another cable into it, and we can do it again. There's 2 points to what would potentially limit how many times you could stack this cable. The first being the signal, because this is passively splitting the signal. It's not a buffered active split. You're effectively diminishing the signal every time you take a split. Now, it's not as simple as saying, here's 5 volts on this cable. Now I've split it 2 ways. There's 2.5 volts on each side.
It's much smaller. Like it's very minuscule. So
if you had 5 volts on one cable, but you split it twice, you might have 4.8 volts on both. There's a kind of a tiny error. Now you're amplifying that every time you add a new cable. You can probably get away with 4 or 5 splits for most things in terms of the quality of signal. The reason to not do it passively would be for pitch, because 1 volt per octave is the standard for pitch information. Yeah. For every volt in the cable, in the signal, that's an octave of musical information. So if we're talking 1 volt of signal and splitting it 2 ways means there's 0.9 volts on each, for example. We're very sensitive to pitch. You would hear that was out of tune, for example. But if this is an LFO and you just want that one LFO to control lots of different things, you're probably going to get away with it. The other reason not to maybe go above 3, I would say, is the strain on the jack socket itself. That's heavy, and if it's going to add a lot of strain, mechanical error in the jack socket, I would say. Now, something you can do that I didn't get for a long time, if this is my LFO, for example, and this is, say, the filter, I can then split the signal again at this side, because the flow of electricity is coming out of, say, my LFO, through all of these cables into here, but there's still a stack point there. So you can daisy chain from this point and then into another one.
You're bringing out the LFO.
Yes, and you can keep daisy chaining. So there's really no reason to have like
those cables, Ben. Those cables are they sort of same as the HOSA hopscotch?
Yes, yeah, same thing.
Basically, they split the signal.
Yeah, Tip Top were the first company. Tip Top Audio to make these stackables in the format. They actually patented them, which there's some debate over. A Modular Addict did make a very similar cable recently, and it kind of hit the fan on many forums and groups, shall we say. But yeah, mechanical strain is more of a worry. Don't passively split too much for pitch, because you'll hear it.
Yeah, I saw somebody, Adamski, and good seeing you. Adamski is here as well, one of my regular viewers. I see Simon the Magpie is here as well. Studio Geek 32, my youngest fan, is here. And no, Studio Geek, I have not gotten a haircut yet. I'm still waiting for some more donations to the haircut fund. I actually got I think got like €5 to cut my hair or something. But speaking about splitting stuff, Adamski asked if he saw correctly that I used a splitter, and I used one of the knuckle bones from Hosa in one of my videos, and that's basically pretty similar to one of those stackable cables, right? In practice, what it does.
Exactly the same thing.
But what happens? So here's a technical question that I haven't. What happens if you put two outputs into it?
The only rule in modular really is to not patch outputs to outputs.
Yeah, so basically that will mean that the voltages from one will go to the other.
Yes.
But what will happen if you put something in into an input? Will it take both outputs then?
So no, it depends. Now a passive device generally, and this is just passive, a signal would come in and all the connections are wired together and you get copies on all the outs. It would bleed through signal, but it would bleed through both ways because it's not an active circuit. So
yeah, sure.
There's no direction to tell the current to flow in. So if I had, say, one LFO in here and, you know, a few different outputs to different things, and then I go, oh, I want to add an envelope in, that envelope I've plugged in will go back down, or at least try to go back down to where the LFO came from.
So no multiple outputs into any passive units.
Yeah. Now, Myla Melodies, Alex, who, again, another great channel and friend of mine, did kind of say, you know, screw it, it's working, so I am mixing through passive means like this. And this is where it gets confusing for people. You can, and there are several instances where it's fine and it will work. And some companies actively say, do that with these modules. It's a more efficient way to work. But not all companies do. And if you do it and end up, you know, blowing a capacitor or effectively screwing one of your modules, you're not going to be happy. So just because, say, a make noise module is, you can protect the circuit. Basically, as an engineer, you can add things to that circuit to protect those inputs and outputs from the voltage flowing the wrong way. They'll just block it from happening. So if you've done that and you're actively saying, yeah, do that, it's great, you can mix it all passively, but the module you're doing that with isn't protected, you're kind of at risk. There's very few instances, I think, of it really going wrong, but it's just bad practice.
Yeah, that was something that was really new to me going into Eurorack, to start to think about voltages, electricity, currents, you know, those sort of stuff. Really, I know you were on kind of on standby when I was plugging in my first module and I didn't blow it up. Amazing. I was so nervous. I was like, okay, I double checked the red line on the cable, and also I had like a scary like a scare on my Patreon forum because my man Scott, he blew one of his modules when he rearranged his rack, and I was like, okay, you can really do that? Like, that was kind of crazy to me. It's definitely not. It's not an area where I'm not even interested. Like, I don't really think about URAC in the sense like voltages, that sort of stuff. I don't really have like a technical way of understanding it. I don't have a framework for it. I don't really care. I just want it to work. But I realized that I need to learn more and more about it, of course, because it will make it more easy. But
yeah, you definitely just need to be aware of these things. I'm not, my electronics knowledge is minimal. I very rarely solder anything. DIY in Eurorack is great. If you're into DIY, there's a really supportive community. That's like level 10 of the rabbit hole that is mod. I'm not willing to go down the DIY.
No. Heck no. I'm not even putting my own furniture together. I have my wife to help me with that. Man, I'm so uninterested.
Yeah, just a quick tip, I guess, from Di Stanton in the chat. ALM Beast Chalkboard is a very good buffered mult. Now, I'm going to pull this up because I really do agree with that statement. Let me just find Beast Chalkboard from ALM. Seemingly.
So what's this? Like, what does it do?
It is a buffered multiple in that
Okay.
it will actively split a signal, so it's very accurate. So if you put a pitch signal into it,
Yeah.
split it several ways, and you'll get the exact voltage out.
Okay, so here's a beginner question for you, Ben. Why on earth would you put in a passive multiplier in your rack when you can just use splitter cables?
I tend not to. I mean, a passive device, you could cut a hole in the side of the inside of a toilet roll tube because it's passive. I don't have anything passive to hand. In fact, yes, I do. I'm like, so I built. This was from Oscillosaurus, Gareth, from part of the kind of Australian modular scene, was giving these away at Super Booth last year as a kit. I did solder this recently. It's effectively, and you can see on the circuit, it's a few jack sockets, a pot, a few jack sockets in a pot. Now it's a very simple module, but really useful. It takes two inputs. That's a crossfader from input 1 to input 2, and there's the output, and then it does it.
Yeah. But then suddenly you have a lot of utility because you have the fader.
Yeah. Well, as it's passive, there's no power connection on it. I can just leave it dangling off the cables. Now, I don't like the idea of bare circuit boards dangling in the way of me getting to things, but you could just put it in a shoebox, or if you're good with a drill, I guess a metal pedal box, and you just leave it there. There's no kind of reason, I guess, to waste space on passive stuff. Something like that's very useful.
Yeah, I can totally see I can see the so with my vocabulary I would call it like the mergers.
Yeah.
Like those kinds of things, or you split something. Well, I guess like the merging thing is what I think makes most sense.
Yeah, there's maybe just not, there's too much for that to be done sort of in line in a cable, I guess. But in terms of a passive splitter, I think it's just the ergonomics of it. Do you want, I'm going to do it to kind of illustrate a point. The design flaw with the knuckle bones, by the way, is that there's an output on every single side. It needs a kind of flat side, I think, in order for it not to take up so much space. Now, when you've got that, it's modular, like it's
it's very big.
It's a bit too. It needs a flat.
It looks like some kind of alien.
Yeah, super useful, but massively in the way of the patch, and if that's dangling in front of the modules. And so I guess it's that more than anything. I quite like having a point that isn't in line in my cable.
So passive and active stuff, the main difference is simply that when if I get this right, like passive stuff is just letting whatever current is, whatever voltages is coming through, it just redirects it or controls it somehow. And if it's active and powered, it will actually maintain a certain voltage exactly.
Yeah, well, passive in the simplest sense just means it's unpowered. There's no power. That just works as is without power at all. Active is a powered circuit.
Yeah, but what does the powered aspect actually do?
Okay, so power allows you to buffer a signal. Now, if you're into stage management and running meters of cable or guitar pedal boards, buffering will not let any kind of signal be lost. So
the signal doesn't degrade.
Yeah, now you can, and there are bad designs in your rack, have a bad buffered multiple. So this is a multiple or a splitter, one input to multiple outputs, the same copy of the same input. There will be that little bit of signal drop on this because it's passive and there's no circuit to kind of just give everything a little boost to keep it as pure as possible. You can have a bad circuit design, of course, that doesn't really buffer the signals properly, and at which point it might be as bad as an unpowered one. So it's a bit of a minefield. Just to swing it back around to what Di said. So this is Beast's chalkboard. Really, really cool device. So it takes one input in the top left corner. You get the through output, which is a buffered and a good buffer of the input, an exact copy of your input. So you can still use that elsewhere in the system. It then goes through this octave switcher, which is a rotary switch that will do -1, -2. 0 position is just the same signal, no shift, or +1 or +2. And then you've got 2 outputs. And then you get that again on the bottom of the module. So like a 2-channel device. So you could put one input in the top, get the through output and both of those outputs. You could then patch that to the bottom and get the 3 outputs again. So you've potentially 6 copies of your signal on this, but with the ability to shift octaves.
Interesting. So you could, for example, take a signal from my MiniBrute 2 into it and make a sort of a 1 or 2 octaves lower signal.
Yeah, so you could have, I guess the use case that you mentioned, the Bafako, even VCO, you could have that tuned in unison. You've got the MiniBrute sequence going into the Bafako, even VCO, playing perfectly, and you just think, it'd be really cool if that was an octave lower. Now, without having to reach for the tuning and do it by ear, you can just say, right, drop an octave, or drop 2 octaves, or go up an octave.
Yeah, or add 2 signals.
Yeah, or now I want to use another oscillator, or maybe you want clouds to track pitch as well, so you take that out of Beast Chalkboard as well as the even VCO.
Yeah, sure. Interesting, cool, very cool.
That's a useful little device.
Yeah.
What I wanted to touch on, and we will keep dipping in and out of the chat, but
yeah, definitely.
Break from that for a moment. Your kind of point coming into this is very kind of semi-modular.
Yeah, definitely.
Over 32. Are you gonna try and integrate all of that around the start of a system, or are you building around just the MiniBrute? Is there anything on the Mother 32 that you're gonna try and use as well?
Yeah, definitely. So for those who don't know, it's the Rackbrute, the 6U from Arturia, and I have the MiniBrute 2 as my kind of starting point, and I added the clouds as my first module, and now I'm just getting a couple of different modules. And I will definitely rack the Mother 32 because I think it has at least a couple of good things going for it. I like that it has the little mixer on it that you can use. And what I really dig with it is that it's the mixer. So the mixer, you can. I don't know. Yeah, you probably know this, but you can change what source. You can blend the 2 sources in the mixer with the mix CV knob, and you can automate that as well. So I think that could be a really cool way. Maybe taking like one signal from the MiniBrute 2 into the mixer, and another signal from the MiniBrute 2 into the say the clouds, and back into that mixer, and modulate. Sort of moving between the 2 sources or something like that. That could be a lot of fun to try out. And also just having the voice of the Mother 32 makes sense for me to kind of build upon.
How tonally different are they? I mean, I have a microbrute and I've used the Mother 32, so
yeah, they sound pretty different, I think.
Yeah.
They I think the Mother 32 has a really pleasant. I've seen some people say like the Mother 32 sounds kind of doesn't sound like an old school Moog or Moog, but I think it's definitely more like old school sounding, kind of warm, fuzzy, compared to say the Sub 37, and it's definitely like a how do you say, rich? I think it's a bit of a richer tone than the MiniBrute 2. The MiniBrute 2 is more versatile. You can do more sounds with it, but it doesn't have like just the raw waveform on like a raw sound on the Mother 32 sounds really cool and really nice, very pleasant.
Yeah. So that's potentially a lot of space taken up in the rack. Are you going to rack the Mother 32 in the Rackbrute?
Yeah, yes, I will do it. But I'm very aware that as soon as I get enough modules, I'll pull it out, because they have the MiniBrute 2 as a sound source. Because it takes up quite a lot of space, and I think okay. Here's the thing, also, like why I'm a big advocate of starting with a semi, because it's something you can always revert back to. So what I'll do is I'll just pull the Mother 32 out of the rack, put it back in its box, and then I'll just put it beside the rack and use it whenever I need to. So it's very easy to kind of move back out of it. I think when you have these semi-modulars, like they integrate very well, but at the same time you don't necessarily need to use them. Like I could use the Mother 32 just like for bass lines or leads in my setup somewhere else, and that's something I really enjoy with it. That's like a big plus, I think, compared to, I know the Pittsburgh SV1 is one that people recommend a lot as well to start out with. But if you don't go for the black box, you have to rack it, and you can't really use it otherwise. And that's what I like with Mini Brew 2, 2S, and the Mother 32, that you can just go back.
Yeah, I think the real key part of semi-modular, and why I'd recommend it as well, obviously if you get one whose tone and voice you like, you know, be that the Mini Brew or the Mother 32 or one of the new Behringers or Pittsburgh, you've got a reset point. When you pull all those cables out, you're back to the architecture that synth was designed with, be that oscillators into a mixer, into a filter, into an amplifier with an envelope for the filter and the amplifier, or whatever the default signal flow is. You have a reset point to revert back to, which is useful, because there are situations where you may trip yourself up. It might be that sound has all of a sudden stopped, and you can pull stuff out of the modules and none of them are interconnected. So you can almost on a semi-modular go back step by step until you find the kind of error in your patching, if there is one, and still have everything else work because it's all interconnected anyway. And also with a Mother 32, and you may find this, that you take it out of the rack, you're not really using it in the modular system anymore, it's just its own base synth.
Yeah.
You might just want one more LFO, and there's one in the Mother 32. That might be
exactly. Yeah. You know, I foresee that I probably won't use the voice on the Mother 32 that much. Maybe just bring it in to add character. I'm more looking at like a big utility unit where I'm at now. Like I got the LFO, I got the two outputs from the LFO, both the square and saw, is it, I think. You have the noise, you have the mixer, you have a pass. I don't know if it's an active or passive splitter, but you have the multiplier on it.
I'm not sure.
And you have the sequencer that you can integrate, and the sequencer has some cool stuff as well that you can use. There's the assign output that can do different things depending on how you set it up. And you could even pull the amp envelope, even though it's a limited one. It's just attack and decay. You can probably pull that as well. So yeah.
So
I saw. Yeah, sorry. Shoot.
I was going to say, someone commented on the. I was on Sonic Talk this week talking to.
Yeah, I heard you mention my good looks. So.
Yeah. And someone said, "I love, Ben, that you just reach down under the desk and pull something out." So I've done it again purely for.
No! Don't reach under the table and pull something out, please. Don't. You know, kids-friendly show.
But they mentioned with the Neutron, and it's come up in the chat. Sorry, your name's just gone past me. But about the jacks being off to one side and what was my preference. Now, there's kind of two schools of thought with this. If all the inputs for the filter, I'm just using the Neutron as an example.
Yeah, sure.
The filter's kind of here. If all the inputs for the filter are here, it's quicker, I think, visually quicker, because you have your cable from wherever, and you just into the filter cutoff or into the envelope modulation.
Isn't the Model D a little more like that?
Yeah, but it's super limited into ins and outs. I mean, you get the LFO as an output, you get the volt per octave on the Model D, you have an external mod input. The mixer has an external in. and then you can gate the filter and amp envelope separately, but it's limited. There's a handful.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But the thing that I like about the kind of dense patch bay on the side and the Model 32 as well,
yeah,
I think it potentially makes you patch in a way that you wouldn't think to do, because you, for example, got I know people probably can't read this, but say if I'm taking out the mix of the oscillators and I'm looking to send that to the filter, I mean, that's the default patch anyway, but maybe I'm about to do that and I see right next to it, oh, there's LFO shape. I wonder what sending oscillators into.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I've got the LFO and I was going to go into the filter, but oh, there's delay time. Let's see what that does, kind of thing. And I think that kind of stumbling your way through it's slightly encouraged when every opportunity to patch on this is here.
Yeah, I think it makes a super good sense for beginners. For somebody like when I started looking at the Model 32, I'm still sometimes I'm like, okay, wait, is this actually the output? Is this actually the input? Just so I don't accidentally hurt the module. So having them split up makes a lot of sense that way, because you're not as confused or looking twice, where am I putting stuff? But I think we talked about this, that I guess for a more experienced user, it makes a little bit more sense, like on the Model 32, that you have the inputs and outputs of the filter at one point, and you have the mixer at one, everything together, because oftentimes, for example, if you're patching stuff to the mixer on the Model 32, you want the mix CV input right there as well, and the output from the mixer as well. I think it makes more logical and workflow sense when you're more experienced. But it's but yeah, the Neutron looks really cool. I think it could definitely be like one of those go-to recommendations for somebody starting out, and the price seems amazing.
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing about it, and I like the Model D, the DeepMind 12 as well, to be fair, that the DeepMind 12 started its life as a kind of Juno, a homage to the Juno. It's by no means a clone of a Juno 106 or Juno 60, and the Neutron isn't a kind of clone of anything. And I like that they've just kind of said, let's make a synth voice. Having an overdrive and a BBD delay, I think is, it's not totally revolutionary. Synths have been ran through guitar distortions and pedals and delays, and synths is really common. But to have an analog BBD delay there, and the overdrive, and splitting out the sample and hold from the LFO section, there's just nice touches on it, sonically and kind of functions as well. And
and they also go a totally unique route with the most ugly color I've ever seen. It's fucking horrid.
It's the same color as your drawers in the background.
No. This is a deep red. The Neutron looks like it's like it's much more pinkish, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if people have seen it. There's all these panel graphics.
Yeah. Oh my god.
That haven't gone.
Oh my god.
No, they're not.
Paint warning. Uli Beringer sat in paint and made this. Heard it here first. No, I'm just kidding.
It's definitely polarizing people, though. It's a little bit Marmite, we would say here. You love it or you hate it. Some in the chat as well. There's a few people saying, "I love that they've just gone red. Why does it have to be black?" And
I could definitely make a case for me buying the Neutron or the Model D just to make like provocative synth content.
Oh yeah, you do, because the thing with YouTube is thumbs down is still positive engagement as far as the YouTube algorithm's concerned.
Yeah, definitely.
But you could.
I think one of my I have to check it out. Like I have like a Model D video. I gotta Google it here. YouTube. BoBeats. It's one of my more silly videos.
You could definitely get a lot of content. out of Behringer. Not that you're hating Behringer, but Behringer hate videos and out of YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. And you could also cater to both audience at the same time. You could do like like the Behringer hater stereotype and the Behringer lover stereotype.
Like when newspapers print different headlines on the same day and publish them in different areas of the country to serve different communities.
Yeah, exactly. Like I would go like, Behringer, that's cheap crap, blah blah blah. They can't do anything right. And then I would just turn on the flip of a coin and would turn and be like, oh my god, Behringer is cloning everything. It's amazing. It's the best thing since biscuits and tea.
Uli Behringer, man of the people. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Like the biggest synth company, like the biggest multinational synth company, like man of the people. Yeah, it's lovely. No, but yeah, it's all good fun. I mean, I think I've never had anything against Behringer. Personally, don't own a lot of their products, never have. But I'm definitely mindful of the poor rep they have in certain circles. I think it's probably not well deserved. I think they make some really good stuff. And it makes it accessible to people, for sure.
Yeah. My last kind of point on that before we move on that I think is weird. Music group or music tribe that Uli Behringer owns. I've acquired a lot of different companies. I won't go into listing them all. Some of which names have kind of been pulled through the mud now. Like, I'll never buy this company's product because they're owned by Behringer now. And other companies seem to be flourishing and don't ever seem to get bad word about them because they're now under this music group kind of company banner.
Yeah.
I find strange, but
well, it's a meme. It's just an idea that people have. It's just an idea, a concept that's been so much, said. It's been said so many times over and over again. It's become a truth of its own.
Yeah.
It's just like it's like there's the other way around as well with companies. Like some companies having a really great reputation, even though they're not always
they've got really bad customer support or
exactly, stuff like that. Like everybody's like, oh, Korg, oh my god, amazing. And their support of the Minilogue has been pretty horrible. I think there's been one patch, no, probably more than one, but there's still problems with the firmware stuff, small stuff that they should have been able to fix, but they're not doing it. So I think that like every company has their like their pros and cons, their ups and downs, and Behringer is no different. But at least they're delivering something at a price point which will make it a lot more accessible to a lot of people. Because buying like a Mother 32 to try out Modular, that's 650 euros, I think, or something. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. We've already polarized the chat. There's someone saying, they did have their share of lawsuits against Mackie in the 90s, which they did. This came from somewhere, of course.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
saying Behringer do half the cost, but they sound rubbish. I would urge you to try the products for yourself if you can. And luckily with Behringer, unlike this modular stuff, you can walk into a music shop and try the stuff.
Yeah, I think like Klaus here says, I mean, I saw the comment and yeah, that makes sense. But the thing is that these sort of group mentalities that form online and form in certain circles, they're not based off of good rational reasons in general. They're based out of mostly anecdotal or just like general attitudes that have been thrown around online, and generally there's little of substance to them. I think it's there's rarely any bad apples, I think, in this this genre of electronic stuff. I mean, I think most companies are pretty decent for the most part.
Yeah. So we'll look to kind of wrap up soon-ish. So for the live chat, you are about 30 seconds behind us in terms of live stream, but keep firing the last few questions, and we'll get to answer them.
Yeah, sure.
So the next part of your journey, getting into Modular, and it's been really interesting to get to know you a bit more personally as well. Hopefully the same for everyone in the chat, and maybe vice versa for your audience that's in the chat with me. But so Clouds is in there. You're expanding the Mini Brew 2. You've got your potential 4th oscillator after your kind of hack to get the 3rd oscillator out of the Mini Brew. You've got a spring reverb. You've got the delay. Is that going to be the next part of your series of getting into your rack, these Bafako modules, or do you have
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the next step will be. Well, I've just finished up a video on the Clouds, and I've been exploring it, and it's lovely. And the next step after that, I think, will be to rack mount the Mother 32. Just try and see what I can do with that, and then it's probably getting to know the Bafako, the delay, the crush delay, and then probably I'm also very excited about the spring reverb. I must say, playing the springs on the spring reverb, that's something that's coming up as well. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, and I watched your video on the dual Borg filter, and I think it sounds really good, that filter. So that will be fun. I think I'll be checking that out as well. So I got my work cut out for me. But one thing I've and this was something I learned from my friend Mark. I will also check out the 8 attenuator from the 8 attenuator, or how it's said, from Maleko, and I'm really like I told you earlier, like that was also something I hadn't thought about before. That you had to attenuate the LFO, basically, like when you I didn't really think about that. You like when I plug out the LFO into something, like it goes all over the place. And with the Mini Brew 2, it has an attenuator on it, and it's really useful. It has two attenuators actually, and so that's something that's the 8 attenuator. So that's something I really want to explore a little bit more, because I think it's something that's quite overlooked by a lot of people like myself that come from the heart. We sort of just take it for granted. Like you have the rate knob, and you have the depth and intensity of the LFO, and it's just, it just works. You don't think about that.
Yeah, basically any depth knob on any hardware synth is effectively a VCA or an attenuator. So
yeah, so what would be the technical difference between an attenuator and a VCA? Like technically, like what would be that?
Okay, so VCA stands for voltage controlled amplifier.
Yeah.
Now, in most cases, there's no amplification at all. Full signal level is just the input signal times 1. It's just full level is the full input. Now, you do get some VCAs that will amplify and double the signal level or more. But so in that case, if it's not actually amplifying anything, it's just going from 0 to the full input level. It's really a voltage controlled attenuator. So with an actual attenuator like on the Maleko one we just had on screen, you could plug in, say, an LFO that is swinging from positive 5 volts to negative 5 volts. This is way too much for my filter.
Yeah, so you can.
I just want to wobble it a little bit. So attenuating it will bring that in. Now, a voltage-controlled attenuator lets you use a CV to influence the level of attenuation or on the VCA. So for modulation, you can take 2 really simple sources. I mean, most people see a VCA when their sound goes in, you plug an envelope into it, and the envelope controls the sound, so it doesn't draw on endlessly. If you put in, say, an envelope to the CV input of a VCA and an LFO to the input, the shape of the envelope would be how much depth the LFO has. So that the kind of classic example that people get suggested in terms of starting out with this is on older monosynths that have a vibrato that will fade in. So you hold a note, and the longer it's held, the LFO kind of starts to wobble. that's the LFO going through a VCA with an envelope attached to it, because it starts at nothing, and as the envelope is rising, the LFO starts to wobble more and more until it cuts off. So you can use VCAs to modulate modulation, and with very simple sources, that becomes very interesting. Take, I don't know, 2 triangle LFOs that are at different rates. One will come through the VCA, one will control it. That's like having someone grab the knob on the VCA and just constantly be turning it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So this simple kind of LFO that would just cycle is now having its depth pushed and pulled all over the place. And it becomes a really complex signal potentially just from 2 very simple input signals.
Yeah.
So the VCA aspect is the voltage control of it. The attenuator itself is usually just set by a knob. You just set the position and that's it.
Yeah, so it just limits.
Yeah. Adamski said, like the LFO delay on a Juno. Yes, the same on like a Roland SH09 or an SH101 where there's a delay slider next to the LFO. And you press a note and the effect of that LFO is delayed. It kind of fades in.
Yeah, and I thought like the Minilogue, you can use the envelope, the EG envelope.
Yeah.
You can use that to impact the pitch, for example. So you can set the pitch level and use the envelope to control when that pitch shift comes into play.
Yeah, exactly that. The other thing that the attenuator does, and I won't get into it too much here because it's a long time, it will rectify and half-wave rectify signals as well.
Yeah.
So now I've read just really quickly. An LFO is bipolar. It swings from a positive voltage down into a negative voltage. An envelope, for example, would, for the most part, be unipolar in that it's off, and then the voltage rises to the envelope shape, then it goes back to being 0 volts and being off again.
Yeah, sure.
Now, if a full wave rectifier will take the negative portion of the LFO and actually flip it up into the positive range. So that LFO that went positive to negative now goes positive to 0. It can't go negative, so this bit then flips up again. So it effectively doubles the LFO rate because it's now kind of got just humps.
Interesting.
A slightly different shape. A half-wave rectifier will just cut off all negative signals. So the LFO will do the top part and then stop while it's negative, go up again, stop while it's negative. So that's another cool trick that the Moleco attenuator does. A really good example.
So basically, you get a quite different wave shape.
Yeah, it effectively cuts half of the LFO off. Yeah. A really cool thing for full wave rectification that someone told me early on the Muffwiggler forum is, they said, think about a string instrument. You know, on a synth, you can use an LFO for vibrato to make the pitch wobble. They said on a string instrument, you can't bend a string up and down for the most. I mean, you can if you've got a whammy bar or if you're going to bend the neck.
Yeah, sure.
But by just bending a string on a violin or a guitar, it will only go up in pitch, whether you pull the string up or down on the neck. You're stretching the string, whichever.
Yeah, sure.
So they said if you want to mimic like a guitar bend or a guitar vibrato, you need an LFO that will only go up in pitch. So if you full wave rectify it, it's more guitar-like vibrato. And it's a really subtle little trick, but for those that want to really get deep into synthesis, that's the difference. You can't bend the string down when you're kind of wobbling the string on the neck on a guitar. And it was things like that on the Muffwiggler forum that I was like, I should be paying attention to all this. Yeah, you spend an evening playing around with all this geeky stuff, and then it starts to soak into your general approach, I think, and it becomes a bit more effortless that way.
Yeah, I saw a statement here. I don't know if it was to me, but DB Pavlan suggests that he gets a disting, which has all those functions. So I don't know if you directed it at me, but disting is also a unit that I'm curious about because it has such a multitude of functions. But I'm also, and this might set me apart from some people in the chat. I don't know how you feel about this, Ben. So this thing is like one of those modules that makes a lot of sense theoretically. Like it has a ton of functions, But
I know what you're going to say.
I don't really like it's still just like one function at a time, and I'm not sure if I want modules that I need to kind of how do you say, program in that sense. I'm not that into it. I'm not sure. Like it's
I know what you mean. You don't want to turn your modular to think, oh, let me just set the disting to mode 3.
Exactly. I'd like something where it's more like, okay, if I want to do this, I just like the clouds. That's on a decent level for me. It's like beep beep. You just turn the the different blending and whatever you can do. But yeah, there's something off-putting with that.
I can get what you mean. The disting, super useful, as are all the expert sleepers things. I think what most people tend to do, and especially those that start with them and keep, even in a big system where you might think, I don't need it to do all this stuff because I've got all those functions elsewhere now, maybe with more knobs and more control. They just find 1 or 2 modes, I think, that really speak to them. And that's it. I have a friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I think, so one guy I talked to, he said something like that. He said, like, you're basically just, you get one device, sure, it has multiple functions, but you'll only use like 1 or 2. And then he said, why not get that function instead on a different device that has a little bit more options on it, maybe more hands-on control or something. And I think, like, I really want to try this thing out and see if it's, if this is just all in my head or if it's really something I'm feel strongly about. I'm
What I'd like to be able to do with things like that, and I do jump around a little bit. I've only got a Disting Mark 1. I haven't kept up with the 4 different revisions of it. I mean, the development on it is super impressive. Ozzy's work at Expert Sleepers always is.
Yeah.
I'd really like a device like that where, and maybe Oz would help you do this and flash the firmware yourself, where you can, play on it, learn on it, and maybe just find 2 or 3 modes that really speak to you and just wipe the rest of the firmware. Just put a new version on that just has the quantizer, the delay, and the oscillator and nothing else. Just to really kind of quicken its use potentially. And that's not just the disting I'm thinking of. In general, these kind of multifunction utilities. It would almost be nicer for my headspace sometimes to just have the default firmware that does everything, but then have the option, ideally just over a USB cable, to say, I only want it to do this one thing. So all that function's gone. I can put it back on another time when I plug it into the computer, but it's just going to do this. Because you mentioned parasites for clouds earlier. You can get really lost, I think, potentially in some of these alternative firmwares, at least.
Yeah. That's why I'm holding off. Like, a ton of people told me, like, parasites, and I'm just like, I think I want to keep it as simple as possible, not to get too lost in setting stuff up and try. What I really enjoyed. The reason, kind of my reasoning why I went for the Bafaka modules that I did, was that I simply went for modules that I could, with my limited understanding, I could get. I understood what they did, how they function, that sort of stuff. Like I picked stuff like that to start off with, rather than I looked at the Rampage, I looked at the mats, and I realized there's a ton of utility there, but I really didn't want to start off with something like that because I felt like it's quite complicated learning.
Yeah,
there's so much you can do with it, so much you can learn, but with a delay unit, it's more like instant gratification. You just plug something in, you get a delay. Of course, there's a ton of things you can do with it as well, but it was really appealing to me to just start with some more simple modules.
Yeah, there's 2 schools of thought with that. Taking they're effectively based on the Surge format, dual slope generators, worked on heavily by Tony at Make Noise. It isn't just a straight clone, but Maths and Rampage, they've got their history in older formats of modular. You either kind of get it and learn on that, and then you quickly realize why they're so good, why everybody always says you've got to have a Maths. Even though I don't, as we said before we came on air. But, it does feel like a familiar little hub. Even though I don't have one, when I get to someone else's system and you're looking at this kind of canvas of stuff you maybe haven't used before that's all in a different order and patched differently. It is a nice little kind of hub to work from. But there also is that other aspect that you clearly find more appealing of, if I learn all the building blocks simply, you're then going to instantly know how to get the best out of maths. And if you do then buy one, you will be flying around the thing because you've learned.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's like super complicated, but I did feel like and especially since I wanted to document my journey, like even the clouds is maybe slightly on the, it's not overly complicated, but it has a ton of functionality. So I didn't want to bog down my URAC with a ton of modules that has super many functions, because I felt like, I could get stuck here for a long time with these modules. But I'll probably add something like the Rampage or Mats further down the line, for sure. I mean, I do get the utility aspect of it, and the functionalities seem great.
Tom Curtin, and thanks for saying this, because he's exactly what I was on about. He said on the disting, there's a playlist option for you to select a few of the algorithms that
okay, cool. Yeah,
perfect. I love that idea of these two effects, the delay and the reverb, are all I want it to do. That's great. That's exactly what I was thinking would be helpful for it.
Rafflesbrugger, or however you want me to pronounce that name, says, "Don't look at Myler Melody's A Chemist Castle video, though. Then you'll need one." Yeah, I've heard good things about the Chemist Castle.
That came from, just looking at the live chat, John Irby said, "Speaking of FM, imagine a Eurorack-sized Yamaha S."
Yeah.
S1R. I mentioned the Chemist Castle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that seems really cool as well.
Yeah, it's only one voice, though. You're getting a polyphonic operation with these old FM units.
Yeah, sure.
This is a big, in fact, I just dropped loads of modules out of the case. In the Magic DivKid sticker case, the Chemist Castle's there. So it is a big module for just one voice.
Yeah, sure.
It's two oscillators, but they share some of the settings. And
yeah, it seems cool.
I did at one point think about potentially selling these, and then I figured, who's going to want some stupid
yeah, it might be a little bit
it's a bit too specialist, unless they want to start trying to dress like me or something.
Yeah. One thing coming into your rack that I have been thinking a lot about is that, if you go onto a synth forum and you start asking for advice, you'll get a lot of clashing opinions. You'll get a lot of different perspectives on things. But man, URAC, that really like I asked a ton of people for advice, and you get such a wide scope of advice. It's crazy. Like somebody says don't start your rig with stuff like fancy stuff like clouds. Buy these simple modules first, blah blah. And then somebody else goes like, no, buy clouds. It's amazing. It's such a wide range of opinions and ideas. Plan out your rig. Don't plan out your rig. I guess, but one thing I took away from that was the one universal advice was to buy used. that advice seemed nobody seemed to want to counter that advice.
No.
And another one I took away as well from all the forum posts was, don't underestimate how many cables you'll need.
Yeah, UB6. I mean, each one of these stackables they're about €8-9.
Yeah, sure.
£7 in the UK. But the problem with cables is, and I've worked in schools and colleges for music for a long time, telling someone to go spend £20 on a good 1/4-inch jack guitar cable because it won't break really quickly if they look after it. People just want the cheapest. It's a bit like the power and the case thing. It's almost like I've spent $800, euros, pounds on the modules. Why should I spend 300 on a case? Why should I go spend another 100 on cables?
Yeah.
You can get cheaper cables, and they don't have to be the the stackable kind either.
Yeah.
But yeah, well,
I'm pretty happy to have a sponsor on board for the cables, because that would been a huge expense.
Yeah.
That just, it's not really a fun thing to purchase.
Yeah. So let's look to wrap it up in a couple of minutes. Absolute last chance. I know I said this a while ago. Last chance to kind of get anything in the live chat. But yeah, so when can we expect new videos? I'll point, like I said, I'm sure lots of people are aware of your channel already, but
for better or worse.
When can they expect new videos in the?
Well, unless I blow up a module and make a fun highlight video of that, because that video I just have to post instantly if that happens. But I think maybe late next week I'll probably do like a second Eurorack video on my the Eurorack with Bow series, and in the second episode will be an exploration of the clouds, which is the first module I got, and that'll be. I think there's definitely some strong audio examples and demos of the clouds in it. I think I managed to get some decent, albeit clouds sounding demos. It sounds clouds, but yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you for joining me. One question, sorry, last question. Hugo K, I don't know what a K and then a C and an E is. Hugo Ken, we'll say. What are your thoughts on Eurorack samplers?
Yeah, I'm curious about that as well, because that's something I've been kind of excited about, but not sure about.
They've all, a bit like kind of choosing the right filter. They've all got their strengths and their weaknesses. Starting small in terms of the ones I'll talk about, radio music from Music Theme Modular is fantastic. Tiny little 4 HP wide module that works as a kind of fake radio. Reads all of the sounds off of an SD card. The sounds are always looping. And as you scan between the sounds, it's like tuning between different radio stations. And it's great because as you kind of go into the next sound and come back, the sounds are still being looping. It's not like one thing starts, stops, starts again. It's very much like a fake radio. And that's a lovely way of working with sounds and textures and like vinyl crackle to mix into your beats or background sounds or drones. That's really cool. The Tip Top Audio 1, which again is 4 HP in size, and I believe it's that's the Gristleizer Chris Carter version. One, just because it was to hand. Really cool. Higher kind of DSP rates and stuff, I think, than the music thing. High quality sample playback. Really cool. I was playing around with this earlier before I pulled it out, just with drum sounds in there, because analog drums they're fantastic, but sometimes you just want that layered up real sound or acoustic sound. So that's really cool as well. Getting into the bigger ones, the Make Noise Morphogene. I currently have a Morphogene Mondays series. That's really fun, granular system, very playful. For me, I tend to create textures and experiment on it and let that inspire new ideas. I've had 2 tracks that I'll be releasing soon, actually, on Bandcamp, and it'll be free for my Patreon supporters. That directly from playing with that patch was a case of I have to record this and release it and do something more intentional and music. So that's really cool. There's the ER301, which I know nothing about really, but looks fantastic. It's called the Sound Computer, which I think is very apt, very powerful, computer behind a module. The one that I will have a video on soon and been going in depth with is, I hate doing this backwards, the assimilator from Rossum, Electro Music, which was responsible for a lot of sampling history. Dave Rossum was EMU. 8 voices, stereo input, stereo output, but all 8 voices have an individual output. And the thing it does that nothing else does in the format, to my knowledge, or anything other than the bits of software, you can phase modulate samples in real time. The only other place I've seen that at audio rates is in the SoundHack software, and that's an offline process. You select 2 sounds, tell it what to do, and hit go, and it churns for 30 seconds or a minute, and then you're given a new file. This will do it live. So there's some great examples. If you put Rossum Assimilator, or Rossum Electro Music is the company name, Assimilator, into YouTube, there's some videos from NAMM and an older version from Superbooth back in Easter last year, where he'll maybe just play a single trumpet sound, just burp, and it stops. And then he plays a piano sound. And I think at first a lot of modular users are thinking, this sounds like some cheap Casio keyboard. Why do I just want a burp? There's a trumpet. Ding, there's a piano. I'm not interested in that. But when you phase modulate the 2 of them, it's like the bowels of hell open up into a sound I've never heard before. And it becomes really exciting from something that's like, we've got trumpets and pianos and string sounds, like a kind of cheesy 80s Casio keyboard. It becomes instantly a bit of a, oh, wow, this really is something special. But generally, for samplers, I know I completely went off on a tangent then. They've all got their places. I think for a real powerhouse sample workstation, I'd probably, Contact, for example, is going to be really hard to beat in any format. The Electron, the Octatrack is like, hardware holy grail of sampling as well. Digitact or Digitact. I've been told by Gaz Williams at Sonic State, because people are so anal about it being Moog and not Moog, that we have to be very anal about Digitact instead of Digitact for the proper pronunciation.
Digitact. Analog rhythm.
Rhythm and a Digitact. I like that. I think if people can be really anal about Moog or Moog, we should be for Electron.
yeah, exactly. And it's IKEA, not IKEA.
IKEA. Yeah, they do. At least the English adverts, the voiceover does say IKEA.
It does. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
The English adverts, yeah.
Awesome.
Was in IKEA. There was an IKEA advert of a bedroom, when they kind of make up the fake room, that had a modular system in it on the bedside table.
Ooh. But haven't you seen the video of the guy who has like a ton of vinyl?
Oh yeah, that built.
They clean it up and they organize everything. It's such an amazing video.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I'm not sure if it's real or if it's scripted, but it's really cool.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
Just to finish on samplers for Eurorack, I'd really, if you're just in the modular system, you're completely doorless, just using modular, they're potentially a really essential tool for a whole other palette of sounds that would take up a whole row of modular to create, or you maybe couldn't create at all. Yeah. If you're using other devices, I'd try and play around. I know it's hard to get access to this stuff, but go to community events. I've got a Huddersfield event here in the UK in 2 weeks. Modular Meets Electric Spring Festival, but there's various events in every country. Try and get to or start some kind of group. On the Muffwiggler forum, which if people are aware of is great, modular focus forum, there are threads in the kind of general and off-topic section where someone will just say, hey, is anyone here from Denmark? And there'll be 3 people that go, yeah, should we get together? And it's like, yeah, great, you should do.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I might be going to Synthfest.
Yeah, in October.
Yeah, in October, yeah.
Yeah, come over.
Since my baby is coming in March, I think October would be reasonable to get out and travel a bit. And I have a lot of patrons in the UK, and a couple of them I think are going to Synthfest as well. So I might head over. Will you be going, Ben? Or
I will, yeah. Do a little bit of work. Well, my own back for the last year at Synthfest in terms of video, but for the first year, a little bit involved with organising that with Sound on Sound. Nice team over there to talk to and work with, and kind of get involved with a bit of the setup in that first year. But yeah, it's about an hour and 30 away from my house.
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
You can come and play on this.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, if I go, I'll probably try and go like for a week, because it's on a weekend, right? I think.
Yeah, it'll be a Saturday.
Yeah, so I'll probably try and go for like a vacation, pretty much, and meet some of you guys and do something like that. So yeah, maybe I can bring the mini brute and the rack brute on the plane.
We'll have to hit up their distributor here if you want to have a play with one of them. They'll be there. Maturia will be represented at Synfest. They have been the last 2 years.
Yeah, I should talk to them. If they want me to do something.
Well, Adamski in the chat just asked where Synfest will be held. It is a Sound on Sounds event in Sheffield, here in the UK. A few people said, why Sheffield? Why not London? I mean, anyone that's not from London in the UK, it becomes a bit of a off topic, especially for more northern people like myself, that get a little bit pissed off that people think London is the centre of England or the universe. Yeah. People in London seem to think so sometimes, and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it's in Sheffield because that's a lot of synthesizer history for UK music is Sheffield based. A bit like Detroit is. Sheffield was the kind of steel city in the UK. And with that, like it did in Detroit, came a lot of the kind of synth wave, new wave, synth pop band. And that's where that, at least it was, maybe not as much now, but that's what the kind of centre of synth music was in the UK. And they're kind of paying homage to that and trying to get guest speakers in from those times. And it's a nice sort of central point as well for people coming down from Scotland and up from London and so on. Yeah, Cabaret Voltaire, as Class has just said, Human League, Heaven 17, the list goes on in terms of kind of important synth bands. So yeah, well, let's wrap it up there. It's been great just to chat and get to know you, chat about synths generally. I hope there's lots of tips in there for those that came very specifically for the kind of getting started in modular chat. Yeah, anything you'd like to kind of finish on? Links, anything you want to promo?
Yeah, just thank you for having me on, and thank you for being generous with advice for me getting into this, and just being very helpful. And I just want to shout out the people in the chat. Don't forget to hit the like button on the video. Help the man Ben out a bit with the likes. And yeah, this is going to be a fun journey. Hopefully I'll stick with it. I do foresee that I will, at the end of this year, I'll probably add another 6U to my rack brute. It's a big risk, it's a big risk that I'm going down the rabbit hole. But yeah. And if somebody is new to my channel, feel free to check it out. The links are in the description. I do kind of variety synth content combined with cringy humor and yeah, some psychology oriented stuff.
Yeah, cool. Well, for anyone that is new from Bo's channel, as I said earlier on, if you've still stuck with us this long, do feel free to approach me and ask questions. I give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're a huge reason and part of why I do what I do on here. On Patreon, you can hide the amount of money you make, but not the amount of patrons. I've left it on there because I kind of think it's nice that people see that as well. Just a personal choice of mine, nothing against anyone that wants to remove it. But, this is it currently, if you look at my Patreon, it's just short of about $1,000 a month. It's not paying to bring up my child and my family or many bills, but it's making a very significant difference. Everyone on there keeps telling me I need to be more specific and kind of pushy with Patreon.
Yes.
I don't want to be pushy. I want to be more thankful for the people that are on there rather than pushy with people that aren't. You will get kind of absolute priority over my time on Patreon in terms of, well, I'd be silly to be chatting to people on Facebook if there's people that throw me a few dollars every month getting ignored, but people here as well, I will try my best to answer everything, messages, comments, wherever that is. Hopefully you find me very approachable. I chat to people new all the time. There's no stupid questions for getting into this stuff. even though I felt like I had very stupid questions early on. Ask away. It's a really cool community. Hopefully the live chat, for those that can see it live, has been evident for that. Go support Bo on Patreon as well, because I want to keep seeing you make more content.
I can just second what you're saying. It's a super good way of supporting the channels that you guys like, even if it's just with a small amount. It's always very, very helpful. It's like Ben says, doesn't really pay for tuitions or stuff like that, but it's enough to kind of warrant spending a lot of time on this. And I hope, and also we don't forget, we talked about it, and you're probably coming on my show as well in the future, maybe in a month or two, giving the viewers a little bit of a breather from this talk. And my interview series will it's a bit different, I guess, from the normal tech and music talks. I try to get a little bit more into like the personal side of things, because I find that interesting, like what's a day in Ben's life like and stuff like that. So I hope you want to come on and be a part of that as well, Ben.
Yeah, I'd love to. I don't mean it in a kind of egotistical, I think I'm interesting way, but there's a lot more background than just synths. I think people see the DivKid channel and the modular thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like the synth community is great, but there's this like it can be a little bit boxed in, a bit narrow in the sense like what we're focusing on. If you make a video about something different, people like, oh, what's this? So I think it's really good to kind of show people a bit more what's going on behind the scenes of all these tech demos and reviews and whatever. I think that's a lot of fun, just to get a more personal connection with people.
Yeah. One really brief non-modular thing that came up earlier, and someone said, share this tip if people get chance, because it's funny. Was playing with a band in Croatia at Soundwave Festival, and the way we got a bigger audience just by luck was there was a boat party with DJ Yoda that was leaving right as our set started. So we kind of times our potential audience by 10 as a small band by having been on the stage next to the entrance for the boat party. So there's just a kind of random odd little bit of my life, I guess. I don't know why I brought that up.
It's interesting. I think there's more stories from where that came from. So we'll have to schedule an interview and a talk about that as well.
Yeah.
And I want to hear everything about the crazy raves you've been to.
Yeah. Well, I'm fairly sensible, but we'll see. I did once where last really stupid and embarrassing story, just because why not? I did for a few years in my teen years wear leather pants and try to be play Guns N' Roses in a rock band for a while. I thought I was Slash in some black leather trousers.
I think I saw something here in your look. I saw. Is that a little bit of mascara?
I remember them coming and just the look from my parents, like, you want to wear leather trousers? And I was holding the guitar upright, like, yeah, it's so cringy and horrible. But I'm happy to pull all that out. Anyway,
It's
thanks
awesome.
very much for your time.
Yeah, no problem. It's awesome.
Thanks to everyone in the live chat. We'll get soon. Cheers, guys.